Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Off the Shelf with our own Dawn Gepfer interviewing a very exciting debut author, Lisa Malice. Lisa is actually named Malice. That's her actual name. She's a former corporate psychologist and has a debut novel out called Lest She Forget. And Dawn's going to talk to her about her path to writing that and the book itself. It's a deep psychological thriller where we follow an amnesiac's journey to try to remember her past while at the same time running for her life. Prior to publication, the manuscript earned finalist honors in 5 unpublished manuscript contests. That's the Chanticleer International Clue Award, the Whodunit Mystery Writing Contest. She originally was from Minnesota and then spent 23 years in Atlanta and decided that was too cold, and now lives in Port Richey, Florida, where she's a member of the Florida Gulf Coast Sisters in Crime. She's also a member of International Thriller Writers and Mystery Writers of America. When she's not working on her next exciting mystery, she leads a typical Florida lifestyle, going from air-conditioned car to air-conditioned building, and hovers in there except when she's out fishing, sailing, shelling, golfing, hiking, and kayaking. And I assume, not being on the coast myself, that when you talk about shelling, you're not talking about shelling peas or pecans. She enjoys reading, traveling, and entertaining family and friends, and we're very excited to have the former president of Sisters in Crime Atlanta chapter here with her debut novel. Dawn, take it away.
Thank you, Lance, and good morning, everybody. As Lance mentioned, Lisa is the former chapter president of Sisters in Crime Atlanta, and she was my first friend when I joined the chapter. So I'm super excited to have her here today and chat with her about her debut novel. But before we get started, and please forgive that noise, my dog is throwing her bone. Stop. Sorry. Sorry. Okay, before we get started, we really want audience engagement, so we encourage you to participate in the conversation, and you can do that by just speaking up, or you can raise your hand, your electronic hand. It's under the reactions tab on the screen. Or if you're not comfortable speaking up and you want to ask a question, you can put it in the chat, and one of us will ask the question on your behalf. So I think we're ready to go. And Lisa, Lance mentioned a really interesting bio, but there is so much more to you than what he mentioned so briefly. So I would like you to kick us off by telling us your backstory and tell us all about Lisa Malice.
Well,
writer.
the writer or the person or a combination of both or what?
Let's start with the person because we're going to get to the writing for sure.
Okay. Well, I'm originally from Minneapolis, Minnesota. I lived there for 25 years. I had 5 kids in my family, 4 girls and 1 boy. And so we were all always ganging up on each other. One of the seminal experiences of my life growing up in that family is my mother was an enormous mystery fan, enormous reader, but mysteries were her big thing. And so her bookshelves were filled with Agatha Christie, Nago Marsh, all the great mystery writers from that early era. We also listened to the CBS Mystery Theater Sunday nights on the radio. And then when the CBS mystery movie came on Sunday nights, we tossed Disney aside and we started watching Macmillan Wife and the Snoop Sisters, my favorites. Always loved the Snoop Sisters. They were great. So I was pretty much a jock in high school. I didn't do a lot of reading except for Sherlock Holmes. I got really involved with Sherlock Holmes. I read all his stuff. I just loved all the logic of it. I was very much a logical person. But then I went off to college, got a degree in psychology. I was having too much fun partying and going to classes and things like that. So I didn't read much at that time, but I did start writing what it was kind of a romantic suspense novel back then. I actually had a little word processor. You could see the little screen and all the words coming along there. So that was my first effort to try writing something, and I didn't get too far in it because the screen was just too small. You couldn't read anything. Anyways, I did start reading a lot more once I got to grad school. I had more time to read, so I started reading Sue Grafton, Sarah Paretsky, Diane Mott Davidson. It was really the heyday of well, it is more of a heyday all now, but that's when Sisters in Crime was starting back in the early 80s. I think it was 86 when Sisters in Crime started, and so that's when all the female authors started banding together to try to get more exposure and get better publishing deals and things like that. So I think that's part of the reason why there was such a boon in female mystery writers at that time. After that, kids came along, and I did a lot of PTA stuff. I was always a leader in that area as well. I'm a compulsive volunteer, as you probably already know. So I got elected PTA president that first year that my daughter was in school. I didn't know any better. But all the programming that I did in PTA had to focus on education. So wherever I've gone, everything has always been a focus on creating programs that helped educate, whether it was in PTA or the robotics team or Sisters in Crime and things like that. Yeah, at one point I thought I would write young adult, and because my kids were just shoving all these young adult books at me, you need to read this, mom, you need to read this, mom, like the Hunger Games and the Twilight, not the Twilight series, Divergent series. But when I was reading the books cover to cover, all the books, and my kids weren't. So I said, well, why should I keep reading your books and thinking about writing young adult when you're not even finishing them? So then I decided I needed to follow my passion, which was mystery. And when I decided to become a writer, I met Mary Kay Andrews at a Cobb Library function. And she started writing as Kathy Hogan Trocheck, which is her real name. And she was writing mysteries. She wrote for the Atlanta newspaper. And she was one of our early members of Sisters in Crime. Isn't that correct, Sharon? Sharon, yeah. But when she started writing Southern women's fiction, she changed her name to Mary Kay Andrews, which was her kids' names. But my first meetup with a real author, she said, if I'm going to write, I need to join Sisters in Crime, Mystery Writers of America, and Romance Writers of America, because romance writers had a lot of educational materials and webinars and classes that you can take to learn. And after that, I went to my first Killer Nashville. That was in 2013. And after that, I got an idea for this book right here. While I was on the elliptical one day at the gym, and an ad for an identity theft commercial came on, and I started teasing out an idea and go, what if? And then so I had kind of a basic idea for my story, and I sat down and I started pantsing it. Just started writing it and needed to see where it went. So that's what it was at that time. It was called Lost and Found. So she had lost her mind and she had to find it, type thing.
Mm-hmm.
And I after a couple of years, I guess that would 4 years. 4 years later, I thought the book was ready. So I went to Thriller Fest, Pitch Fest, to pitch to agents and see if anybody was interested in buying my book and publishing it or representing me. And I got a lot of interest for queries and things like that, but nobody really, thought it was great and didn't hear back from a lot of folks. So then one of the people I had met at Thriller Fest was actually somebody that we had on one of our early webinars at Sisters in Crime Atlanta. And she had recommended another person who might be a good webinar presenter. As an editor, she worked for St. Martin's and Crooked Lane. And so I was actually just talking to her to see about her being on one of our Sisters in Crime webinars. And at that point, I realized maybe I really need to let her take a look at the book. So she did a critique and said, and I realized then that there was a lot of work still yet to be done on this. I had too many genres. I had serial killers and all this other stuff going on, and saggy middle and all that stuff, And so then I hired her to do a development edit, and then I just started at the very beginning and started writing again. And she was just really thrilled with what I was able to do with her feedback. And that's when things started to change. I did manage to get an agent, but that was during COVID. It was kind of tough. But she was also going after the really big publishing houses. And we weren't getting, when you submit to publishing houses, there's all manner of different ideas and reasons for them turning you down. Not all of it has to do with your story. It also has to do with what other authors they have or how they see the book and different things. So we exhausted most of her resources in terms of, who she wanted to submit to. And so I let her go. And then I started querying again to the smaller houses. And I had my low-hanging fruit and other ones. I got an offer from a low-hanging fruit. I wasn't too thrilled with it. But then I saw that CamCat was a new publisher and they were going to be at Killer Nashville. And I only discovered this the week before Killer Nashville was set to happen. And this was in 2022. So I went online and learned all I could about CamCat. They had instead of just sending your query letter and your synopsis and your file, they had a questionnaire for you to fill out. And it was very comprehensive and very thought-provoking. So I was really intrigued by this different approach by this publisher. And I was also excited because the publisher, the woman behind it, was a serial entrepreneur. And my family is all entrepreneurs. So we know that, success as an entrepreneur is really something you got to work at. But only the smartest and the best would rise to the top there. And she's rising to the top. So I filled out the questionnaire and submitted everything. And then my first day at Killer Nashville, I got the offer. And it was just so exciting. So from there on, we went and I helped design the cover. So I was able to fill out a little questionnaire of what I envisioned the cover to look like. They came with 3 different ideas. And eventually we worked it down to looking like this, which the response to the cover has just been fabulous. Everybody just loves the cover. And it does reflect the story. I also decided that the title at that time was Don't Look Back, and I thought that was really a tired old title. So I brainstormed a bunch of different titles and submitted it to the editor to see which title they liked best. And we came up together with the same title, Lest She Forget, which never has been used. So I wanted something that was unique and different. And then after that, we did the developmental edit, and that took let's see, that was from January to May to get all the editing done. And after that, it was starting on all the promotion process, getting the ARCs sent out, getting the blurbs from authors. And it's just been it's quite a whirlwind in the last few months.
Let's go back to your book cover real quick. And you said it reflects the story. And so without telling us too much and giving too much away, because the goal here is to get our audience interested in getting that book off the shelf and in their hands reading it. Tell us how the cover reflects the story.
Well, my character, Kay is her name. She doesn't really believe it's Kay, but that's what the name that they began on her in the rehab facility where she's recovering from a car accident. We will say it's a car accident, but in the first chapter, you actually see that she's being run off the road. So it's not really an accident, but nobody's really telling her what's going on because they don't really know either. But she ends up in a coma, a self-induced coma, basically, which is a psychological coma, basically. When she wakes up, she's got what's called psychological fugue or dissociative fugue. And that's basically amnesia, where you can't remember who you are because you're blocking out your entire personality. But she is haunted by flashbacks and nightmares, and this reflects her nightmare of what she sees happening. She's watching somebody being murdered, and she's powerless to stop it. She's held back. She can't speak. She can't scream. She can't move. She can't do anything in this dream to stop the murder. And so this book cover just reflects that scene.
Mhm. And I like the colors of it. I think it's very dramatic. The font is, to me, it's reflective of the drama. So I agree with you. That's a very intriguing cover.
Thank you.
So you talked a little bit, and Lance mentioned that your story is about an amnesiac.
Mhm.
And you also told us that you were inspired with a what if after watching a commercial on identity theft, right?
Right.
And yeah, and so tell us how, again, without giving too much away, how you started there and you progressed to this point. So when you were doing the what ifs, were you thinking you might write about an amnesiac, or did that come to you as part of the
That came
process?
later. I was trying to figure out how somebody could wake up someplace and not know, well, and go back to the life to find out that things aren't as they should be. I can't really go into it too much because that would kind of give things away. But it's one of those things where you're pantsing everything and you're just kind of going with the flow. So it took a lot of rewriting to get to the ultimate story. But it's been so long since I looked at that initial manuscript, but I figured there were serial killers in it, and there was, you know, people in there, you know, some really bad actors going on. And it's just, I hate to tell you too much because it would give away what my initial thought was with what the
Yeah.
story would be, lost and found.
Yeah, and that's also interesting. You started out with a title, I'm assuming something you just called it yourself,
Right.
as you were writing it, Lost and Found. And then you mentioned that at one point the title changed to Don't Look Back.
Right.
Yeah, so the title of the story like changed a couple of times.
Right.
And
So Lost and Found was kind of a boring title. After I did my first developmental edit, I thought it really needed a new title, but and also because then if I started querying back with it, it would, you know, it's a very, very different story than what I was querying before.
right.
And a much better story. And Don't Look Back really does reflect the idea that this is somebody who's got amnesia and that is psychologically based, that she's trying to shut off her memory of these horrific events, and she doesn't want to look back. But again, when I started looking at the title after I signed with my publisher, I started realizing that there's a lot of books out there that have very similar titles, and I wanted to really stand out. So I brainstormed a lot of different titles. I gave them a list with that one, Lest You Forget being my top choice. And there was a little bit of a debate, but the editor-in-chief and I both had the same idea that this one was the best. So that's how we got there.
I also like your sharing with us about the developmental editor. And I can tell you, and I always try to clarify this so people know, I am a reader, not a writer. And so I'm curious if the other writers in the audience are familiar with the developmental editor, and if you've used one yourself. Is that something, like, I had never heard, I've only been with you guys 4 years, maybe. When did I started in 2017, so maybe a little bit longer than 4 years.
Mhm.
But how about you, Sarah? Have you are you familiar with a developmental editor? Had you used one, Jeff?
I have not. I just use a regular editor to fix my grammar, and sometimes she does suggest things that I think would probably be more along that line. And most of the time she's correct, and I'll incorporate whatever she says because she's been doing this a lot longer than I have. I've only been writing since 2020, so I haven't used the developmental, but it's probably something I probably should do.
Can you hear me?
This-
This is
Hey, Kathy. Mhm.
hey, I can't tell if anybody knows who I am. I was going to say I don't have a developmental editor, but I will say that because my critique group has some, it's obviously authors, and some of them are published. They serve the role of developmental editor, but as I go along. In other words, you take a little bit of your work, and you have people who are there every week. And so they're really good at catching inconsistencies or confusion, which to me is one of the most important things for the developmental editor to do, to make sure kind of things like, well, I don't know if they catch this or not, but like where she has blonde hair in the first chapter and you forget, and then she has like red hair in the 5th chapter. I'm not sure if developmental editors catch that or not, but I know my critique group catches it. Plus, when I'm smart, I do spreadsheets with that stuff. But
Right. Well, that's that I wouldn't consider that developmental editing. That's probably more like copyright editing or something just farther down the line. When I'm talking about developmental edit, I'm talking about somebody reading the book, seeing what the major problems are. We're talking storytelling, and it has nothing really to do with the words or inconsistencies with, blonde hair here or something like that. These are, very structural issues with the book. And so, for example, in the initial book, I did have a serial killer that was killing people just to cover up the crime of who they really wanted dead. And that was just adding too much to it.
Got it.
So I also, the male lead character, he had a voice, he had a POV in the book. And she decided that was giving away too much. So we left him out of having a POV, and that just really strengthened the suspense because you didn't know who this guy is and what he's doing there, and whether she should trust him or not. So I as a brand new writer, especially writing psychological thriller, which I wasn't really familiar with, and I didn't even know I was writing a psychological thriller. I was just writing a story that I thought was a lot of fun, and you really relied on somebody else who really knew what they were doing, and to look at the book. And I don't think I would have got that with critique groups. I've never been critique groups are not really something for me, because I'm a pantser and I want to write my book and I want to see where it goes. And then maybe we can have somebody look at it after that. But I don't know how all these critique groups run, but some people, and provide their chapter, everybody reads it, and then they make comment, and then you move on from there. That doesn't work for me. I need to get all my ideas down, see where the story is going. There's a lot of people who pants. You might not know this. Stephen King is a pantser. He doesn't know the story ending. He just sits down and writes, But then there's these other folks like James Patterson who write 150 pages of outlines, and it's like, I can't do that, but maybe he can. But I've at this point, I'm kind of in between. I'm a pantser and a plotter. There's some things I need to plot just to get a better idea of where the story is going and then run from there. But the development was a really big deal for me. It wasn't cheap. I think I paid $3,500 for it, but it made all the difference. It really did.
And that's what made me want to ask you about it, is because just having it, in the past when we've talked about it, or I've heard you speak and talk about it, you always bring that up. And as I said, it was a editing that I was unfamiliar with. But yet you've always complimented how that was a good investment for you because it really, as you said, helped strengthen the story. So I just found that very,
Right.
very interesting.
I wouldn't have been published without it. A lot of people don't get their first book published, but and that's maybe, I don't know why that is, but maybe it's because that they have not learned as much as they needed to get that book published in terms of the structure of the story. So, and then maybe they go back and do that. John Grisham's first book was actually his second book that got published. And The Firm was the second book he wrote. That's the first one to get published. And then they had A Time to Kill, which I thought was an absolutely fabulous book. So I'm just really thrilled that the book has just been receiving such wonderful reviews, and I credit my editors with really helping me to polish it off and make it something that people just can't put down. It's just been a real thrill.
So let's talk a little bit about the fact that, yes, it has come out of the gate running, and you are very busy promoting the book and attending conferences and things. And so tell us about number one, how is that happening for you? Are you initiating it and going and getting it? And what it's been like to be involved and all that.
Well, my publisher started out, they do provide some marketing help. They have a group that they hire called Partners in Crime, and they do a virtual book tour, and that started in November, but they had me writing blog posts for guest posts and doing events and things like that for the launch. But I was able to also do a lot on my own because I have a really good network. I've been writing this book and being part of the writing community for a long time and very active in it. And when you're active in the writing community, people are more than likely willing to help you because you're helping them. So whether it was being part of Sisters in Crime or writing for The Big Thrill, that is a digital magazine for international thriller writers, or going to conferences, you make a lot of friends. And so when it comes down, so like Deborah Goldstein, she's a member of our Sisters in Crime Atlanta chapter, even though she lives in Alabama, but we knew each other. And so she had me do a guest blog on hers. I'd met Hank Philippi Ryan many times. So when my launch day came, about a week before, I sent out to everybody I knew some graphics that they could use to promote my book on that day. So it would be either Karen Dion's blurb or Jane Cleland's blurb, somebody's blurb, audio file blurb, and the blurbs, and it just was kind of a fun graphic so that they could post about it. So that was a big help too. So I had a lot of people posting on launch day, and of course I had all my friends buying the book too. And so that really helped a lot. I mean, it's not a cheap book. It's $27.95 list price. But it was Christmas time, and so everybody was buying books for all their friends too. So that really helped the sales on that first day. And I was just thrilled when it hit the new release bestseller list for Amazon as a domestic thriller. So you can have different categories for your books: domestic thriller, psychological thriller. I think we've had murder mystery or murder thriller. I don't know. Amazon comes up with all these different ones, and you compete with everybody else who is listed in that category, which psychological thriller is the hardest one. Everybody thinks their book is a psychological thriller, but a lot of them aren't. But they like the name or the category.
I agree. And that was one of the questions I had for you. Obviously being an amnesiac and this dissociative fugue situation, how is your book defined in any other way? Is it defined as a psychological thriller? And what exactly is a psychological?
So a thriller is a pretty broad category to begin with, and you have international thrillers, which is like spy thrillers, military thrillers. You have political thrillers. You've got medical thrillers. Thrillers generally don't necessarily have to have a mystery to them, but there's an awful situation going on, and you often know who the villain is, and it's a race against time to stop something horrific before disaster happens, and that could be a murder or something, or somebody going to prison who doesn't belong in prison, in terms of a legal thriller. But they can have mysteries as well. A psychological thriller, a domestic thriller, are a lot different than some of those other types of thrillers I've described, because it's usually it's all about just an average person, generally speaking, and then and they're dealing with something horrific in their life, as a domestic thriller might. There's lots of books like that, but when it comes down to psychological thriller, it's so much more inside the head of your character, who often is very confused about what's going on. They may be an unreliable narrator, which means that you can't really trust what you're reading. And it might be because your character can't trust what she's seeing and hearing as well. So you've got, Gone Girl, was it considered a psychological thriller? You had a missing wife. This one was the Ben Affleck movie where his wife is missing and everybody's trying to figure out if he killed her or not. But she set it all up. Her diary was just a bunch of hooey. And that's where the unreliable narrator comes in on that. But then you've got The Girl on the Train. That was the British book, and she has amnesia because she has blackouts, because alcohol induced blackouts. So she's not reliable. She's not sure what's going on. So that's kind of what separates a psychological thriller from a domestic thriller versus the other kind of thrillers, at least in my mind.
And I agree with you that those are difficult to write. And one of the reasons they would be difficult to write is the knowledge that you need relating to the psychology, which segues backwards to your educational background, if we may go there.
Sure. So I started out wanting to be a veterinarian, but I became allergic to everything on the face of the earth. So I gave that up, started in education as an education major, thinking that I would help work with special needs kids. And then I was really turned off by the program at the University of Minnesota, where they were trying to teach us to teach. And I was just like, this is really boring. And then I got into psychology and had no idea what I was going to do with that. Didn't even know corporate or organizational psychology was a thing. I went and found a internship with an insurance company with an industrial psychologist, and that's how I got involved with doing that stuff. So I went to graduate school at Georgia Tech in Atlanta. That's how I made it down to Atlanta, and got my degree there in industrial psychology. Worked for Bell South for a little bit, and but in industrial organizational psychology is what's called. You have to have a broad base of understanding of psychology. It's not just, you have to apply the principles of psychology to business and organizations. So when I worked for Bell South, I did performance appraisal systems, developing programs for people to be able to grow their employees' performance using different performance appraisal systems. We did training and development. I got to do videos. I got to write scripts for my videos. And personal selection, lots of different things there. So
I'm going to interrupt you real quick, because what I find so interesting is what you just described sounds like a combination of your original education pursuit and ending up combining it with your actual degree. That's fascinating that it came back. It was a full circle.
Yeah, so everything that I've done since graduating with my degree, it's generally involved growing organizations, making people more effective, whether it was PTA or Bell South or Sisters in Crime or whatever. I mean, I was always so focused on helping people get where they needed to be. Yeah, at one point I was on the national board on their education committee doing webinars, and that I got that opportunity because we started doing webinars before anybody else did with Sisters in Crime Atlanta. And then at a conference, I think it was BoucherCon, I met Chris Goff, who is a writer, and she was the education chair, and we talked about webinars. And that's how I got on nationally. That's how I got to meet so many interesting people and build my network. So again, being a compulsive volunteer has really helped me build my network of friends and people. And some of them have become very, very close friends, even though they live, other parts of the country. But, that's the one, if you were to ask me one piece of advice to give a new writer, is to be part of the community, the writing community, meet people, go to conferences, volunteer, because you will get so much out of it in terms of people who can help you, with your critique of your book, helping with your query letter. Hank, I would send my query letters to Hank Flippy Ryan, and she'd tell me what to fix and things like that. And so there's just so many wonderful people out there willing to help. But it helps if you are the type of person who's willing to help as well. So make your mark by being active in the community and not just showing up at meetings.
Mm-hmm. And Lance mentioned that you are very involved in actively involved currently in numerous writing organizations. So tell us about those. Like, we know about Sisters in Crime Atlanta. We've talked about that a few times, but also what you're currently involved in.
Well, the other one that I'm pretty involved with is International Thriller Writers, which if you're a published author, you can join that for free. As an unpublished author, I had to pay dues, but I met people, KJ Howe, she runs that organization. It's you're going to I think that was Thriller Fest or BoucherCon. You're meeting these people, and they're just regular people, even though they run massive organizations, and they're always looking for volunteers. And so at the time I had been talking about, what can we do education wise? I have all this experience in education, webinars and things. What can we do? And they weren't ready for that, but she invited me to become a writer for The Big Thrill. And I jumped on that. It was fun because I got to interview people. I got to read their books, interview people, and then write a feature on them for the magazine. And that comes out twice a month now. But it was such a great opportunity for me to meet and talk with people and get to have good friends. One of the people that I did end up interviewing and writing about her book was Linda Hurtado Bond, who's a local anchor here on Fox TV, the Fox TV channel. So when I ran into her at a young adult writers conference that I was covering for The Big Thrill, I was just going to ask her if she wanted to do an event together. And before I could get the words out, she said, well, would you like to be on Tampa Bay Reads? So on my launch day, I got to be on TV with her. It was only 3 minutes. It was terrifying. I don't think I smiled the whole time. But it was just it was just a big thrill. I mean, how many debut authors get a chance to be on TV? But again, it's the networking, it's the meeting people that gets you these opportunities.
Yeah. So let's go back just a little bit and talk about the length of time that it took you to actually formulate an idea and then progressively start to build your book to a publication.
Well, let's see, in 2013, my daughter was just getting ready to graduate from high school, and my son didn't have me doing anything. So I had stopped really doing all my school volunteer work, and Actually, we're still doing robotics at that time. But I did come up with that idea as I was working out, so I went home and started writing it. And my husband was still working, so I had vast amounts of time to spend in starting this book. And I just, started writing it, and the character would come into my head that this scene needs this scene needs that. And so this was 2013, so we're talking 11, 10 years ago, really.
Mhm.
But so it's kind of hard to remember as far back as and how long it took to finish that first draft, but I think it might have been May of that year.
Uh-huh.
But what they say is, the first draft is always going to be the worst thing. It's all the real writing comes in the editing, and that is very true. So I spent quite a bit of time editing and editing and editing. And then I was out to lunch with somebody who was a member of Sisters in Crime and Law at that time, and she encouraged me to start querying. And so that's when I started querying. And that was 2017. Because I thought it was ready.
Yeah, so 4 years later.
Years. Yeah, a lot of people just they keep writing and keep thinking that they're writing and writing and writing and writing, and they're trying to figure out, is it ready yet? And they really don't know. I wasn't really using a lot of readers at the time because I really just didn't know what I was doing, to tell you the truth. But I thought it was ready. I had sent out queries and sent out, and this was like in May. When was this? April or May of 2017. And so I was getting some responses. Please send us your pages. And so I thought, okay, well, I might as well go to Thriller Fest and go to Pitch Fest, which is a whole day of just learning how to pitch agents and editors. And so that was when I really thought it was ready. And I think it was, so that was 2017. And so that's when I met Jamie was an editor for Diversion Books. I don't remember her last name, but we had her on a webinar for Sisters in Crime Atlanta chapter. And that's when she recommended Ann Brewer as the editor for my developmental edit. So then let's see, trying to think. So it was just, so that's when the developmental edit happened, and that took a number of months. There was a lot of work to get done because, it really just, but I took all her suggestions to heart. And, when you first get feedback and you're kind of going, well, I don't know, but then you get a chance to sit back and think about it, and then you go, yeah. And at first I thought, I'm just going to correct a few little things. Then I realized you really just had to start at the beginning and start rewriting. It was a huge rewrite because I had to get rid of a point of view character. I had to get rid of the serial killer, and I really had to hone in what the core story was about and who the characters were.
How many rewrites do you think you ended up doing? Just the one, or did you rewrite again?
You're always tweaking. So it's really kind of a hard question to answer because anybody who is a writer here is always tweaking. But in terms of going from the very beginning and writing and it's really hard to say. It's just something, it's always a work in progress. And at some point you do have to realize that it's not going to get much better unless you've got somebody else giving you feedback and things like that. But at some point I went back out and started querying, and that took a while, but I did get an agent, and I was real excited about that. I thought that was going to be the solution to everything, and it really wasn't. There's a lot of opportunities to publish out there that don't require you giving away 10% of your money that you get from the publisher. And I think I did much better. I mean, my publisher did give me advance. They gave me $2,000 for signing my contract, and then $2,000 when the book was finally accepted for publication after all the editing. But it took a month for us to get our contract straight because when I looked at the contract, it really didn't adhere to Mystery Writers of America's guidelines. And I really wanted my publisher to be an MWA approved publisher, because if you're not, you can't be considered for Edgar's and things like that. So I was a member of the Authors Guild at the time, so I sent it to their lawyer. That was a free service that you get as being a member of the Authors Guild. And then I took his comments and also took the MWA sample contract and worked it out. And I kind of blew the business manager away when I sent the contract back with all these red lines all over the place. He was a little upset. But I explained what my goal was, and we worked it through. And so, I ended up with a much better contract when they first offered it. But they also said that this contract was so good, they were going to use it for the template going forward.
Wow.
And I don't know that the agent would have been as diligent in creating this contract as I was, being anal and all that. Because it was really important to me to have the right contract. And actually, some of my terms are better than what's actually in the MWA sample contract. So, and I'm happy to say that it took a year, but MWA did approve CamCat for authorized publisher. So
and that had a lot, and I mean, and you played a part in that. So
yeah,
that's
yep.
amazing.
Right, because actually part of the process of becoming an approved publisher is that they interview different authors who are members or are being published by that publisher. So I got to be one of the people that I said, I love CamCat. They do such a good job. They're very good to work with. And so, yeah.
So Lisa, I guess you did surprise the business manager, because I'm sure a lot of their first time novelists are just glad to get any contract, and you would caution against blindly signing anything that comes across.
Oh yeah, definitely take a look at and make sure it's favorable to you, because whatever they're going to provide is really going to be very favorable to them. And you have to get your best advice. I think I contacted Deborah Goldstein also to look at it, but the Authors Guild is really focused on looking at the contracts and making sure that the authors are protected. So there were a number of different things we changed in there having to do with what my royalties were and various other things. It was a one-book contract, so I didn't have to worry about, how they managed royalties across the series or anything. But yeah, nobody should ever sign a legal document without having somebody look at it who's got some legal background to better understand what it is and what you can do better. Because contracts, they're meant to be negotiated. Don't just assume that just somebody gives you a contract and that's it. There might be some publishers that do that, but those are probably people you don't want to work with to begin with.
Thanks.
I think one of the things that I'm most impressed by our conversation today is, yes, the process took you 10 years from, first draft to actual publication, but you were very smart about it. And, just what you described in the legal side of the publishing and how diligent you were, but also the way you educated yourself along the way through the drafts and the rewriting and the seminars that you attended to really understand what you were getting yourself into with this, little hobby you decided to take on because your kids weren't demanding your time as much as they used to. So that's really fascinating and inspiring for me.
Oh, good. Well, are you writing something, Dawn?
I'm not.
Focus on reading.
Yes. I'm not even doing a good job with that right now. Reading, so.
Yeah, when you spend so much time writing, a lot of times you don't get as much time to read as you'd like to. So that's kind of like one of the drawbacks but you got to really keep up reading everybody else's stuff, just because it's important to, promote them as well, read their books. You learn from reading other people's work as well. And you know, it's supporting each other. And you get to write it off on your taxes.
That's something else we learned. So
Dawn,
yeah, go ahead,
I
Jeff.
was gonna say, I had a quick question for Lisa.
Sure.
I just downloaded the Audible version of your book. So can you tell me about your experience in doing the Audible?
Oh, well, thank you for downloading that. I'm very excited about that. Actually, that was another thing that I was encouraged to take part in. They sent me, my publisher sent me 5 auditions for each character, main character, my female protagonist and the bad guy. And so I listened to all of them, and it's really weird hearing your words being spoken by somebody else, because you have it up in your head and you know what you think it's supposed to sound like. But it was very easy to listen and know that certain people just weren't right, because they didn't seem to understand how to tell the story with the right intonations and voice inflections that you really needed to, because it was my first chapter in particular, which is a very tense chapter. It's where you see my character driving along on a dark, wintry road in a very dangerous blizzard, and then being chased by somebody. And you could tell that there were certain voice actors who really understood the scene and others that didn't. So I ranked each actor, actress for my selection of who I wanted to read the books, and I provided rationale, so it wasn't just, you know,
Right.
a ranking. And we picked out the same people as my editors and the other folks involved with the decision. And actually, the book itself, the audiobook, is doing really well. It got a Library Journal starred review for the audiobook, and Audiophile Magazine gave it the Earphone Award for November. That's a magazine, apparently. So people are just loving the audiobook. And so I still haven't pulled it myself together to listen to it again. It's kind of hard to hear somebody else reading your, because you're always going to be critical, but I hear it's just really good, and people are really enjoying it. So did I answer your question about?
Yes. Yes,
Okay.
thank you.
So we are actually very close to the top of the hour. And as always, this time goes by so quickly. And I know for me, sometimes I'm like, how am I going to fill an hour? And then we get to chatting, and it goes by very,
Really?
very fast. So a couple of things before we wrap up. The first is, you already kind of touched on it. You said that as writers, we need to also be reading. So are you reading anything right now that you could share with us and we could add to our to be read list?
I'm reading Tess Gerritsen's The Spy Coast. Tess is one of the authors I met very early on, actually, in Atlanta. She came to Atlanta back in 2014, I think it was, and we got to have dinner with her before she went on stage at the Marcus Jewish Community Center. She had an event going on. So we got to spend an hour and a half with Tess. So we got to know each other a little bit better. But this is an interesting book because it's about a little town in Maine that is populated by former spooks, CIA operatives. And she got the idea for the book because that's exactly who lives in her own town in Maine. She didn't realize that until her husband is a doctor there, and he was treating these people, and nobody would really admit to what they did in the past, and somehow they figured out that they were all retired CIA. So she wrote a story based on that, and I'm just getting into it, and there's a local sheriff who gets involved as well. And she's, they're kind of butting heads, trying to figure out who's out to kill her and why. And this is, I think she has another book coming out in 2025, and it's already been picked up by Amazon for a TV series. So
Oh,
I think this is going to be a real fun read because Tessa's just, I mean, she's such a great writer.
yeah.
Whether it's one of her series like Rizzoli and Isles or some of her standalone books are just fabulous. She
And
started out as romance writers, as a romance.
Isn't she a physician too?
Yeah, she always wanted to be a writer. So her dad said, well, you can do that, but you need to have something to fall back on. So she became a doctor. And then she
What was
started writing romance novels and then romantic suspense. And then after that, she started Rizzoli and Isles,
Mhm.
which does have a medical examiner in it. So
What's the name of the book you were just talking about that you're reading?
The Spy Coast.
Spy Coast. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so the last question is, what are you working on now, or what's next for Lisa
I
Malice?
have 2 books that I'm working on. I have so many different ideas, but it's, you can only do so much. But, at the one book I started writing after I finished Lest You Forget has to do with black market babies selling in adoption. So I got that idea up in Northeast Georgia. We had a place up there for a while on Lake Nautilus. At some point, I heard that they had black market babies selling back in the 50s. And the more I looked into it, apparently back in the 30s, the Tennessee Children's Authority was an adoption agency up in Tennessee, and they were the place for all the celebs to go to get their babies. So like Joan Crawford and Lana Turner adopted from that place, but it turns out that they were involved with snatching babies and young children off the street and wherever they could get babies to adopt them out. And some of this was going off in East Georgia as well in the decades after that. And so I started writing a story about that in terms of one of the kids who'd been snatched and what happened in her life. And obviously there's murders happening and stuff. But as I started writing this, it wasn't really following the path of a psychological thriller. So I'm having to go back to kind of rethink my approach to the story. And initially, the body is there, but I think the body disappears unless she doesn't know where it is. She finds a body in her home. And
Okay.
then another one, my brother's been going through chemo treatment, and I was up in Minnesota hanging out at the Mayo Clinic with him. And one of the problems he's been having is having hallucinations because of the steroids that they give him and his tumors in his brain. He's doing very well, by the way.
Good.
And because lymphoma is just very manageable. And but the idea of having hallucinations really kind of interested me, because at one point he was getting up out of bed at night and wandering the halls. And what if you had one of these, a patient there who wandered the halls and walked into the wrong room and saw the wrong thing going on. And then again, so that's a perfect psychological thriller in that you've got this unreliable narrator. We don't know whether what they saw was real or something they hallucinated. At one point, my brother stood up and he was looking around the room. I say, "What do you see, Peter?" Because I'm just kind of going with it. And he's not getting upset at it. He says, "I'm in a TV studio." So, and then there would be a second point of view of the caregiver, such as me, because my experience was being with my brother and having this and going through this and trying to figure out, did he really see these things or did it really happen? So in terms of him being the character who sees something he shouldn't have.
Mhm.
And then you hang out at the hotel bar, you never know who you're sitting to. It could be a good guy or bad guy, something connected to what they saw. So those are 2 things I'm working on right now.
They both sound absolutely fascinating. I cannot wait for both.
Well, you'll have to. Hopefully it won't take me 10 years.
Exactly.
Well,
Well,
my writing skills have improved quite a bit because the second book that I was working on with the baby snatching, I had written only about 100 pages when I submitted it to the Claymore Award for Killer Nashville, which is you submit your first 50 page of your unpublished manuscript, and that got nominated that year. So for the Claymore. So that was pretty thrilling because at that time I was still trying to get some traction with the first book, which was Lest You Forget.
Well, congratulations on your success, and thank you so much for spending your Saturday morning with us. It's great to see you. I'm proud of you. I'm glad to know you. It's been a lot of fun to be on this journey with you. I feel like I have been on this journey with you. So
Yeah, well, thank you very much. It is, like I said, it's something we all experience together, and we all celebrate when one does well. And so it's a great community to be a part of. And I wouldn't be here without you and everybody. So thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
absolutely, it's been a pleasure. Okay, Charlie, do you want to ask something, or are you just waving?
Thanks. Yeah.
Well, thank you, everybody. We hope you will join us again. You can keep up with our program on our Facebook page, but also on our website, and that is www.sistersincrimeatlanta.com.
And our YouTube channel.
And our YouTube channel, yes. What is that? Do you know that? Is it just Sisters in Crime Atlanta?
Sisters in Crime Atlanta.
Okay. All right. Okay. Well, thank you,
Thank you.
everyone. Enjoy your Saturday, the rest of your day.
Thank
Sister
you.
Ro-
All right.
Thanks, Lisa.
Next